Hi, I'm Julia Hankins, and I'm a children's wellbeing specialist, consultant, and mentor. And I work with other kids yoga teachers to help them feel more confident in their kids yoga classes. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to be successful when you're getting your children in your classes to work together as groups or in partners. This can be something that is a lot of fun and children really get a lot out of, but it can be a bit of a challenge and organisationally, and it can turn into a bit of chaos. And I know that some teachers can feel a little bit anxious about getting children to work together in groups or in partners because they're worried about the management of it and what might happen and behaviour and things like that. So I just wanted to share some ideas and things that I do in my own classes that work really well for me. And that's both in after school clubs with a smaller number, but also as whole classes when I'm teaching in schools, so like 30 children. And so the thing that I find, or the metaphor that I find really helpful when I'm thinking about children working in groups and in partnership with others, is this idea of roots and wings. And so I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase before, and it's normally around if you have children yourself as a parent, about giving children roots and to feel stable and confident, but then the wings in which to fly and be free. And that's the kind of idea or notion that I work on when I'm working with groups of children as partners. So the roots aspect, this is giving children really clear instructions of what it is they've been asked to do. So before you're expecting them to work in a partnership or in a group, they are really, really clear on what it is that they're going to be doing. Because if they're not clear, that's when it all goes, crazy. That's when things start to happen. So giving really clear instructions of what they're being asked to do. And this might look like demonstrating some examples of what you mean, or it could look like giving them opportunities to practice something that is similar to that altogether, of what an example of what you're expecting them to do. So, for example, maybe you're wanting the children to create their own pose flow. And so you might give them really clear instructions. You're going to create your own pose flow. I'm going to demonstrate to you what that might look like. Here is my pose flow. Right, let's all try together to do a pose flow. So we'll all do one together. Now you're going to work in a group or in a partner to do your pose flow. So being really clear, really explicit, to the point where you probably feel like you may have done it a bit too much, because there'll be some children in your class that even after all of that will still not really have a clue what they're doing. Also, another thing that I do to provide roots or give structure or stability is giving the children pose banks, something to refer to, something solid that they can build on. So this could be that you're giving them pose cards to work from. It could be that you've got postcards in the middle of your circle, or however you teach. Or my favourite is giving the children these pose banks. And so these pose banks, I have 4 different types. Well, actually, I have 6 different types of them, but the ones that I use for the majority of the time, there are 4 different ability levels. And so, for example, my year reception and foundation, so my nursery and reception children would be using this pose bank, and this would be the one that I know they know these poses. I've taught them these poses, and these are what they can use. So how that might work is they would have these pose banks in front of them, and if they're creating a flow, they would choose the pictures that they know. And I would use these after I've taught them the poses. I wouldn't just, whack it out there and use them as pictures. I would have already have taught them the poses. But that would be different to my year 1 and 2 children, and it would be different to my year 3 and 4 children. And that again would be different to my year 5 and 6 children. And so these pose banks really offer the structure and the roots to base their work on, whatever it is they're doing. It's not enough to just say, okay, create a flow, off you go. So Now we're talking about the wings section, and for the wings of to give children creative freedom. Sorry, my words have gone today. It's really important that you give choice, lots and lots of choice. And when you give children lots of choice and lots of freedom, then you'll find that they'll be more creative because they'll feel more respected. They'll probably be more responsible. If you tell children they're responsible and that you trust them, they will generally be responsible and trustworthy. So giving them the opportunity first is more important. And you can always take it away afterwards if it's not working, but giving children choices. So that might look like a choice of where it is in the room that they're going to work. I generally keep in a circle most of the time. I don't really let them take their mats out of the circle because the organisation of getting them back in time, unless I've got a small group and a longer lesson, they have to stay on their mats, but they can switch mats, they can swap mats. I give them freedom on who they can work with. I've found that if they're working with somebody who they're comfortable with, their friends, they're more likely to be more creative. They're more likely to take risks and try something that they hadn't tried before, because they trust the person they're working with. And the phrase that I use when I'm talking about who they can choose to work with is I say work with somebody who you feel comfortable with but not distracted by. And we talk about that. I also give choices on how many children there are in their group. So they might choose to work on their own, and that's totally fine. Or they might choose to work in a group of 5, and that is totally fine too. So I think it's more important that the children are working than how many children are in their group. We can get so fixed on like, oh no, we're doing partner work now, or we're doing group work now. No, you can't work on your own. It's not fair. Let the children have their choice. They're more likely to create something really cool if they're working with whoever they're comfortable with. And sometimes for some children, that will mean they're working on their own, and that is totally fine. So I give choice where they can work, who they can work with, how many are in their group, and I also give some choice on what it is they're creating, which is why I use these lovely pose banks, because the structure there. But say, for example, my year 5 and 6 children that have these poses, they might also have all the other poses before this as well. But there's a lot to choose from. I'm not saying, right, you have to create a flow with these ones. I'm not saying that. I'm giving them utter freedom within the realms of what I know they know with it and what I know they can do safely. And then I also think it's really important to have clear boundaries. So that means giving time warnings. If they've been working for a number of minutes, you can say you have 1 minute left. Just telling children to stop will be really discombobulating for some children. So giving a warning, you've got 1 minute left, and then they can finish. I also give boundaries in terms of like limits. So say, for example, that flow, I might say no more than 3 poses. So no, I might say something like no less than 3 poses, but no more than 5 poses. And just that gives them a little bit more freedom. They're like, oh, I can choose 3 poses, I can choose 4 poses, I can choose 5 poses. I mean, it's not a massive choice, is it? But it feels like they're being given some choice. So those boundaries of no less than, no more than can be really useful. I also give really clear boundaries and guidelines about what things they can do. So that's why we use our pose banks here, because I know that they can do everything on there safely. I'm very firm on no gymnastics in my classes. A lot of children that I teach do have gymnastic classes after school, and so they are all wanting to go into some very cool gymnastic flow, but that's not the lesson, and so I'm very clear about that. I also think it's really important that when children are working in groups, that I tend to observe during that time so that I can intervene when it's needed. And that's if there's something unsafe happening, that's if I can see some unkindness happening, or if I can see that somebody's a bit stuck and they don't really know what to do and they need me to go and just give a little bit more support. And I might go and give them a little bit more prompts. So I might go and say, oh, okay, which is your favorite pose? Let's start from there. So I might give some more instruction and more support to children based on what I'm observing. So when children are in groups and partners and they're working, I tend to just take that time to really observe and see who needs a bit more support, who could extend a little bit further, who can I go and like give a little, oh, maybe this, and who am I just observing and letting them be creative. Another thing that I think is really important when you're doing group work is the opportunity to share. Now, some children will always want to share, some children may never want to share, and that's okay. Yoga isn't a performance, and I never force anybody to share. What I do is give the option to, and if they choose to, that's brilliant. If they choose not, that's fine too. And so you can share in different ways. You might have two groups that just share with each other. One group shares theirs, another group shares, and they watch each other. That might be how they share. Or everybody might do their creation at the same time. Or we might take it in turns and then people observe each other's, like if that's how they would like to. So although I don't force children to share, I have found that pretty much all of the children that I've taught will at some point choose to share because they know that it's an option and they know that it's a choice. And sometimes they're not up for it, and that's totally fine too. I always make sure that I praise how children have been working together to kind of reinforce that collaboration and, give a really specific praise to people like, oh, wow, I really love the way that you two are in time with each other. Or I loved how this group worked together. They're quite a big group, but they managed it really well. Or, those kind of things to kind of support that kind of collaborative approach. If somebody is on their own and they don't want to be on their own, then I will go and support them. So sometimes children are on their own and they want to be on their own, and that is totally fine. But sometimes they're on their own because they don't know how to approach others, or they're afraid to ask, or they feel left out. And so in that instance, I'll go to the child. I'll check, first of all, whether they want to work with somebody else. And if they do, I'll ask them this question, which I find really useful. I will say, who do you feel safe with? Who do you feel safe with? Because if you say, oh, who are you friends with? That's quite difficult, because actually it may be a child that's new to the school that doesn't really feel like they have many friends, or it may be somebody that doesn't really understand friendships and is a bit unclear about what that means. Neurodivergent children sometimes don't really understand the boundaries of what makes a friend, what doesn't make a friend, but most children will know who makes them feel safe. So that phrase, who do you feel safe with? And then what I will normally do is, if they tell me who they feel safe with, I will normally go over to that person and say, is it okay if this child would join your group? They've said that they feel safe working with you. You're obviously a really kind and helpful person. And normally they're really happy to be chosen, and the other child joins the group, which is perfect. So it's worth taking a small amount of time before the group work to ensure that everybody's comfortable with who they're working with, because otherwise the activity can be counterproductive. You might, if you just don't give any time or thought to it at all, then you'll get some children opting out, you'll get some children getting into an argument, you'll get children being resistant with each other. Whereas if you just allow a few moments just to make sure that everyone is comfortable, then that really maximizes the time that the children have together. And over time, it gets easier, and you need to give less time to managing the groups because they're more used to doing it. So I hope you found that really useful. And if you would like to get your hands on my pose banks, which are my number one tool that I use for group work and partner work, you can get your hands on them in 3 different ways. So you can either actually, there's 4 different ways. 1, you can mentor with me and then you get access to everything that I have. 2, you could do the course Captivate with cards, which is the full training program. You get all of these cards and you get all of these resources and you learn how to use them. Or you could get just the resource bundle, which is just the actual cards and the resources and a little bit of training, but not the in-depth training that is included in Captivate with cards. Or now you can just get the pose banks. I have created another way of getting them where you can just get these. So you don't get the pose cards, just the pose banks. And that's been because somebody has requested that. So that is now possible for you to buy just the pose banks, and you can have them printed and laminated. You can do them in A4 or you can do them in A3, and they're a really useful tool. So I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell, and email me if you have any questions, julia@juliahankins.co.uk. Thank you for watching.